Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of VCTV. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott, joined by some outstanding friends and family of the VCTV universe, or the metaverse, as it's been called by some of our family members. We're here today as investors to talk to you a little bit about what's happening around investing in startups in developing countries. And both of our investors who are going to introduce themselves here in just a moment, Raghu and Gary, have been making investments around the world, myself included. We've seen a lot of different things, more particularly over the last 2 years, but over the last decade, and different regions around the world that have taken in a growth stage for their ecosystems. But in the last two, we've had open access to so many great companies and vice versa. So many great companies have now had greater access to investors. So on both sides of the table, what does this mean? How should you be thinking about it? What should you be learning from those who've made investments? But also, if you are an entrepreneur looking to raise capital, you're going to get the chance to peer into the brains, for better or for worse, of some great investors who've been making investments around the world. But before we get started, big thank you to the LaToken team and to Hasmic for making today's episode possible. Raghu, kick us off. Short intro, background for everybody.
Hi, thanks, Kyle. And so I've been mostly on the startup side and the entrepreneur side, but recently took on as an operating partner at the Ascendo Fund, which is an emerging Asia fund, about $250 million fund, investing in mid to late stage, emerging Asian companies. So we've had some very good deal flow, amazing companies, from India, Singapore, and things like that, and look forward to talking more about that.
Wonderful. We're happy to have you, Raghu. A lot more to ask about that. Such a sizable fund focused on Asia area that we have seen a number of ecosystems flourish over the last 5 years and come from non-existent to all of a sudden hundreds and thousands of companies, thousands of investors, and early in their maturing ecosystem stage. So a lot more to come back to on that. Gary Fowler, Grandmaster of Artificial Intelligence himself, ladies and gentlemen. He is a real human being. He is not an AI. He has joined us today. Gary, give everyone a quick intro and background on yourself.
You always do this, Kyle. It's great to be here. Great to see my friend Raghu. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm a serial entrepreneur investor. I've been involved in 17 startups and 2 unicorns. I was on the original management team of Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion, and also Yva.ai, an AI HR tech company. Love artificial intelligence, quantum computing, the metaverse. Believe that we are in a state of infobesity, and any tools or technologies that help make our lives easier and better quality are critically important. We also believe that intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities aren't. I'm the CEO, president, co-founder of GSD Get You Done Venture Studios, a premier AI in quantum venture studio with an accelerator called GSD Labs that helps those companies go global and to become unicorns. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Raghu, Gary, guys, let's talk a little bit openly about investing in developing countries or transformative markets, emerging markets. They go by many names. It's a different experience than maybe investing in the core regions that most are based in. So for both of you, how have you kind of navigated this experience, especially if you're not on the ground? Raghu, I mean, you're now a venture partner or operating partner, pardon me, at the new fund. You're not in Asia, or maybe you are, and I don't know that. But what has that transition been like in this process, but also in other funds that you've been a part of? How have you made those investments? Lessons learned not being there on the ground?
Yeah, I think primarily I'll talk about India, because one of the challenges we have had is being able to kind of put money in and take them out because the regulations and the repatriation and all have been a little bit difficult to deal with in India. They finally have started this thing called Gift City, which is like Singapore or Dubai, where it is kind of outside the regulator of the traditional regulation of India. They've got its own separate regulatory authority. So it's like you're outside of India. So you set up a parallel structure there for both incoming and outgoing investment abroad outside of India. So that has, I think, helped a lot in terms of being able to operate there. But as far as Ascendo Fund is concerned, I have very senior partners GPs who have deployed funds in India. One of them is Cisco Ventures. He did all the East Asia and South and Southeast Asia investments. So so that part of it is it's taken care of. I don't have to worry about that. Right.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And with the program you mentioned, India, similar to Singapore, we've seen this in Hong Kong, we've seen this in Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, just talking about Asia as a whole. And Europe also has many initiatives in various countries. It actually helps grow those ecosystems furthermore, and they're great places, to your point, to start. So if you're not actually going to be located in a new region, it's a great place to build a network, understand the landscape, understand the companies, the accelerator programs, the incubators, et cetera, that are within the region, who you may be co-investing with. And Gary, I mean, you're building this global accelerator. What has that process been like? And making investments, but also working with companies in these transformative markets around the world.
Well, I mean, the first thing is that, I've done this for a long time, Kyle. I was in Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all over that region, Eastern Europe. And first of all, you got to understand that there are challenges and cultural differences, number one, going in. The other thing is you got to have the credibility and trust in order to pull it off, because a lot of times coming in, they look at people as, what do they say, flash in the pan. They come in and out very quickly, right?
So real quick on that, Gary, I want to touch on that. You've mentioned a number of countries that you've been a part of, and we know you've done a few more, as you're about to tell us here with GSDV. Trust. It's a very key word I want to focus on for a second. How have you, as an investor going to invest internationally, helped establish that trust? Or what advice do you have to those looking to make investments to begin establishing that trust or verify it?
Yeah, I mean, part of the situation, just like we're doing here in VCTV, you got to have an online presence and visibility. Secondly, you have a track record of success where you've actually been involved in building companies, you've raised money, you've invested in companies, those kind of things. I mean, the word gets out. I mean, they can Google your name and see who you are and the kind of things that you've done. So that's important. And the other thing is, if you're dealing with people in those regions that have credibility, that can help do a warm intro, it dramatically impacts the probability of success, because it's people, there's so many people out there, so much information. They need to have that warm, hot contact that can help do the intro for you. So that's important. And then once you have, it's just like doing sales, once this is sales, it's, you have one company that you've helped that becomes a unicorn or has dramatically increased your business, use that as a reference, and it's, reference selling and at the very highest levels from then on. But listen, the challenge we have around the world, we have so many opportunities, so many challenges. At the same time, the greatest opportunities. So 38 countries just in Africa, 1.2 plus billion people, 206 million just in Nigeria. There's so many places that we can go. And in order to solve the complex problems we have around the world today, we need to bind together. We need to come up with the technologies that can help us live better. Global climate change. We're going to have to double the food supply by 2050 to feed everybody. And we can't increase the number of livestock, because 26% of the pollution today is caused by that. We also have to look at, there's only 20, I was told yesterday by very high level executive, there's only 20 crop cycles left before the soil is impotent. And I haven't gone down through and researched it, but 20 crop cycles is only, 20 years, right? Plus. So, we're in a state where we've got to make some differences. So hydroponic gardening, different forms of whether it's wind or solar, whatever ways that we can generate electricity. The other thing is we got to understand that we've got challenges. There's not if we're going to run out of fossil fuels, it's when. So we need to work together now. We don't need to fight. We don't need to create challenges. We need to figure out how to bind together and look at the ways that we can work together, not our differences.
Yeah, and talking about technology, I mean, before technology, I have a question around maybe valuations. A very, very discussed topic, because in the United States and in China and in a few other select markets, valuations are very high, or valuations have a process and standard to them as well. developing countries, that valuation can be all over the place and sometimes much less than a competitive company. Raghu, how have you looked at valuing an early stage company, or how have you looked at valuations in developing countries since you're making investments all over the world?
Yeah, I think that's a very difficult topic because there's a lot of there's almost a bubble right now. So India went through, for instance, like huge valuations in the first round, and many of those companies were not mature enough to kind of deserve that valuation. But now the ecosystem has become stronger and more mature, and but you can still see that a lot of unicorns coming out of India. I think it's true in many of the other countries in Asia as well and Africa. The key is to normalize that based on the similar parameters that we are using here that we're familiar with. And I'm doing now some cross-border transactions where we're actually investing in India and then bringing them to the US. I think Gary is doing something similar. I'm on my third one where we take a minority position and then we swap it so that it becomes a US parent, a majority-owned company, and then take it to market here. So the valuations are important, and how we are looking at it is basically taking out the arbitrage in terms of currency and all that. We look at if the company were to have that market in the US, how would it be, and then give a small discount, for making it happen in the global thing. These are companies that are trying to come to the global market, and they already have traction in India. That is one that I worked with in multiple occasions, so I'm more familiar with that. I think, and IP-based companies, again, it's easier to value because scientific IP, as long as it's US patents or somewhere where it's enforceable, I think it's easier to value. But retail companies, it's a different metric. So yeah. I'm not into that much.
No, it's. I think that's a good, boilerplate for a lot of investors that might be, starting new in those types of investment cycles. But question for both of you, outside of countries you've already mentioned. So Raghu, I'm going to start with you. Outside of India, what other maybe 2 or 3 regions and or countries do you see as on the up and coming when it comes to those transformative markets with great ecosystems or early ecosystems and really some great entrepreneurs to start investing in?
Yeah, I would say Africa and the UAE, because UAE is just, in this whole pandemic environment, they've become the hub for logistics. And they are also putting a lot of money and resources behind a better regulatory system for patents, as well as incentives for startups. I was there for 10 days and I got to meet and talk to all the people in person, both on the authority side as well as some of the local entrepreneurs. So I see a lot of stuff happening there. The second, I think, is Africa. And our friend Gary can probably talk about it a little bit more.
Before Gary goes, so let's try and go one level deeper. Where in Africa are you, Raghu? Gary will have his chance. Where in Africa are you seeing maybe a particular country or area, a lot of development?
My particular opportunities I'm looking at, one is in Ivory Coast and another one is in South Africa. The Ivory Coast has done very well, in the last 10 years among the West African countries. And one of my former employees who used to be working with me has now taken a grant and actually built a system, the company there, in data analytics. And then they're trying to basically help all the startups, not just in Ivory Coast, but all over Africa to use analytics, and not only for impact projects, not just for, commercial projects, but even for non-profits and things like that. And he's done an amazing job. And I have just kind of reconnected with him in the last month. And we're trying to, what he has shown me, I didn't know how much was going on. And I'm getting to see it through his eyes. So,
all right. Well, there you go.
South Africa is, again, a similar contact that, because I don't have any direct knowledge of either of those economies and the kind of the ecosystem.
Yeah. All right, Gary, you're up. Now, you can't mention Africa. I'm going to take that off your plate for a moment, because Raghu's already talking about it. Where else, 2 or 3 countries that you're seeing growth and startup ecosystems that people should be paying attention to that they might not be already?
Yeah, sure. So the Czech Republic, Slovakia,
Ooh.
Poland are really hot. In fact, I was on stage with Steve Wozniak in the Czech Republic, and I got 517 PowerPoint presentations for companies. I mean, they're extremely active there. So those areas are really hot. Some places you normally wouldn't think, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And the reason is they're looking for higher valuations in Silicon Valley because the investors are pretty conservative there. And the companies, I tell them they think in I worked in Germany for a while. It's like a thinking in a box. And not all of them, but many of them. So a lot of them want to have that Silicon Valley mentality. And again, Silicon Valley is just a port to the rest of the world. So I would say those places are pretty hot. And then we forget about sometimes Latin America, places like Chile, Brazil, Argentina. There's 647 million people in Latin America. And there's incredible talent there that's untapped.
Yeah.
So those places are coming on. But, remember, intellectual capacity is evenly spread. And as technology starts to permeate in different areas, you're going to find startups start to really show in places that you normally wouldn't see them.
I will agree with you on Latin America. I think it's a very well-kept secret thus far. And I think that we're about to see it magnified greatly over the next 5 years. There's a number of investment funds, a number of investors who we've had here on VCTV, but also in general, a lot of activity in some of the major cities and countries throughout Latin America. I mean, I'll throw Mexico on that list, but one that may not get talked about a lot is Colombia as well. There's a growing tech scene in Colombia, so keep that on your map. Mongolia, is another one as well. We've seen a lot of venture activity starting to happen there. I'm going to throw out Australia. I think a lot of people haven't given Australia enough credit for some of the great entrepreneur activities that are happening on both sides of the coast of the country. And there's a lot there. And I think Australia, Colombia, Mongolia. There you go. So everyone, you've got a few different countries to start looking at. You've heard now insights from investors on where and what maybe to do. And in their last point here, in their last question, what advice do you have, gentlemen, for those investors looking to make their first investment in a new country where they may not be based? And of course, where can they find you online to continue the conversation? Gary, Grandmaster, we're going to start with you on this one. Piece of advice for those investors looking to make a new investment in a new company or a new country that they may not be based in. And where can they find you?
Well, I mean, part of it is just like we're doing here is you got to get out and you got to reach out to them. So I like to join pitching competitions all over the world so I can get an idea what kind of technologies, what the people are like in those areas. I like to follow up with them and talk to them, ask them about their lives, ask them about their startup, ask them about their vision, whether or not they're optimistic or pessimistic, those kind of qualities. But they're all over, Kyle. These competitions are happening everywhere. And each one of us can partake in these communities. For the startups that are out there, it's a great opportunity for you. Get some visibility. Go out there and get it, write, present, and try it, because you need practice. Does make perfect. Practice, practice, practice. So I would go out there, move as fast as you can. As we say at GSD, get shit done. It's not about the talk. It's about the execution.
That's right. Get it done. All right, Raghu, same question to you.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn at Raghu S. Rao, and happy to talk to any entrepreneurs out there or investors out there looking to invest in emerging Asia, at least where I'm directly involved with. My advice for investors would be to make sure you have a partner who knows the local ecosystem in terms of regulatory stuff, because very simple things in India, I can tell you direct experience, it takes a lot of babysitting to get the even though the money is flowed, just to get things done. There's some horror stories. 7 years after somebody did an investment, they came back and said you didn't comply with something, and there's penalty and fines and things like that. So make sure that whoever you're investing through has all these things covered, and they know the right system available to take care of compliance filings and things like that. That's one. From the entrepreneur side, I would say, now I think exposure to the global investor network is very much easier than it used to be, and also the avenues are available much easier to get the investment and also expand up abroad from whichever developing country we are talking about. So I think it's a great time. But like Gary said, you have to kind of hone your pitch and address all the different aspects, how the go-to-market works, what is the use of funds, and of course valuation. But valuation, I think market will decide more. But other things that is under your own control, you should be have those all ready and ironed out.
Absolutely. And also for all those listening as well, in addition to both what Gary and Raghu said, build networks, connect with others who may be locally based, but also those internationally that may have had experience, learn from each other, connect with each other, build and invest with each other as well. And for those entrepreneurs, while both Gary and Raghu mentioned, this world is much more digital, much more availability to investors. It also means you've got to do a little bit more work, and you've got to make sure that your stuff is ready, as Raghu pointed out. Make sure your deck is ready, make sure your story is ready, make sure your pitch is there to grab the attention, because attention is spread very thin amongst many right now, and we want to make sure that everyone is successful. So with that being said, Raghu, Gary, thank you both very much for sharing your thoughts and insights to our audience. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe on today's episode, and reach out if you haven't already. Raghu, Gary, and myself would all love to hear from you as investors, what you're building, what you're working on. Those investors out there, we'd love to connect, hear how we can help you navigate the world of transformative markets that you may be interested in, that we have experience in as well. Big thank you to the LaToken team and to Hasmic for making today's episode possible. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.